And welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our guest authors, the dynamic duo themselves, Father John Trigilio and Father Ken Brighenti. Web of Faith, a curious Catholic's answers to theological questions, proudly published by EWTN and naturally available at the top of the list at EWTN's religious catalog, EWTNRC.com. Welcome to both of you to EWTN's Bookmark. Great to have you on.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you very much for having us.
So let me start with you, Father John, because you have the longest history with the concept of Web of Faith, because way back in, what was it, 98 or so, when Father Levis, who did the first series with you, both of you were on with Mother Angelica, right? Was that correct?
Oh, yes, yes. And that's when I gave her the Hershey bar.
Right, I remember that giant...
5-pound Hershey bar.
We've been waiting for those every year, and unfortunately, we're still waiting. But when you were on that show with her, she kind of had that idea that the two of you should do something, right, as I recall?
Oh, yes, yes, because we were answering questions for EWTN on the internet, and we explained that to her, and she said, well, why don't you make a show out of it? We said, okay, and we couldn't envision somebody watching us quietly peck on our keyboards, because that's how we do it by ourselves, and then I think it was you who described how the show would go, is actually we would talk to each other and read the questions and answers. So I thought, well, maybe it might go off. And I think we were a half-hour show the first year, and then we expanded to an hour because we had such a good response.
Right, exactly, popular. Now you, Father Ken, you two have known each other for many, many years, right?
Yes, we have, since college seminary.
Okay. Now, the first programs that you actually did yourself before you did a Web of Faith 2.0 was some other programs, right, with Father John for us?
Yes, we did post-Vatican II documents, and then we did crash course in Catholicism, the Saints, and John Paul II.
Right.
And they were based on our book.
Right, exactly.
The Catholicism for Dummies, the Saints for Dummies, and John Paul II for Dummies.
Right. And both of those books were quite popular. So we turn now, of course, the scripts and the actual transcripts from Web of Faith 2.0 into this new book. And so those started in, I think, around 2012, and you've done about 6 seasons or so. Is that true, Father John, about that?
Yeah, it might be a little more, because I think...
a little more.
Because Father Levis had...
we did actually 10 seasons.
For you guys?
10, I think it was 10, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Well, I know you did seasons with Father Levis, almost looked like about 9 or so, almost 9 or 10, and the ones with you. Well, let me ask you, Father John, don't you run out of questions? I mean, how many times can you answer the same question, or are they the same question?
Well, that's what we thought after we did the first season with Father Levis, that there'd be no more questions, but you'd be surprised how many people, they're similar, but there's little variations, and there's completely new questions that are asked, so it's almost inexhaustible.
Now, Father Ken, with the transcripts and how that reads, is it kind of interesting to read your banter going back and forth? Because it's presented that way between the two of you going back and forth as you did exactly on the show. How do you think that works in book form?
In writing books, this is sort of totally the opposite, because you had to really get the grammar and put it in some piece of logic form. So that's a lot of EWTN did for us, and then we just had to sign off, and then add our own little tweaks if we see it. Yeah. So so when we're writing books, normally we're putting it in that logical form first. So this was like the opposite.
Right. Very good. Yeah. Now, Father John,
it was like conversation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, Father John, in answering these questions over the years, how did you originally get into being one of the people who answered questions for EWTN's forum?
Well, that's interesting, because Father Levis and I were doing, this was the old days before the internet was available to everybody. It was what they call a bulletin board, where you uploaded questions, you downloaded questions, and I think it was Dr. Jeff Myris had something Catholicism online, and then that we were doing that for a couple of years, and then Mother Angelica, I think, bought them out, and we were doing that, I think, for a while on CompuServe, and then on the EWTN's webpage. So we were in the Questions of Faith section there.
Father John, is there a specific area that you tend to focus on when you answer questions versus what Father Ken would focus on, or do you go back and forth?
We go back and forth because we both had the same sort of education, and we're on the same page theologically, I would say. So it works out nice because Father Ken has some expertise in some areas, and I do the opposite. So we sort of complement each other in that way. And so unlike Father Levis, where he was much older, I was the younger priest back then. But we were not, it wasn't like liberal versus conservative, because Father Bob and I were on the same page. But with Father Ken and I, because we're contemporaries, I think you get a different dynamic.
Right, and on that question, I guess for both of you would be the idea, and I'll go to Father Ken now with the idea of, have the questions changed over the years, or are there different issues today that you're seeing than you've seen before?
It's very interesting because when we go down to EWTN, we tape once a year, and whatever's going on in the church during that year is the questions we get. So a lot of questions on Mary one year because the Pope had his Amoris Laetitia. We had questions on the Eucharist. There was a Eucharistic Congress going here, so a lot of questions on that, the Mass. So what's going on in the church motivates the questions, I think.
Right. What about you, Father John?
Yeah, it is very contemporaneous, with what's going on, whether it's the scandals in the church. But then you got some things that are perennial. There's always questions on the Eucharist. Yeah, on the papacy, the Virgin Mary. So it's a nice balance. You got contemporary, and then you've got the eternal.
Now, in the questions that actually ended up in the book and the answers, were those picked by the editor, or did you guys select, Father John, did you select exactly which questions you were going to have featured?
Well, Father Ken and I both worked on this, and it was a joint effort with EWTN. So the editors picked out some and then asked us which ones we would like to put in the book, and because some of them were redundant. And the one thing that we really wanted was that it would be organized according to the Catechism. So the 4 sections of the book follow the 4 pillars of the Catechism.
So go ahead, Father Ken.
Just so you know, it does have an imprimatur from my in the diocese.
Now, let me ask you, Father John, and the only reason I directed over there is because, Father Ken, your audio is a little bit, we're having some difficulty with it. So I think Father John sabotaged it after the test we did yesterday to make sure he got most of the time on the show. But let's talk about, and maybe this relates directly to his bad behavior, original sin. You talk about original sin here in the book. We don't hear a lot about that anymore. Is part of the problem we have today, a lot of people don't even believe original sin exists, or what it actually means, or that it has any impact on us?
I think that's right. There's a lot of people, well, first of all, they don't hear it from the pulpit. It's not in a lot of text. Now, again, going back to Father Levis, one of his jobs was reviewing catechetical textbooks, and it was amazing how many publishers for children's catechisms just omitted original sin, or wasn't in every single grade level. That's been changed a little bit because some of the books are more orthodox. But again, I think with the preaching and just in general, people, it's almost something that Catholics put like in the closet. They're embarrassed about original sin. But I find it very hopeful and uplifting, the fact that we're wounded, but something that's wounded can be healed. If it's like Martin Luther maintained that we became decrepit, well, once you're destroyed, there's nothing much you could do, just covered over with snow, as he said. But Trent said the opposite, that original sin allows us to be healed by God's grace that come to us through the sacraments. So I think when you explain it in that way, and it's like purgatory, when you explain it the proper way, people don't have a problem accepting it.
Doug, I think also there's a problem with sin in general, that people are just not believing in sin in general, that everything is good, everything is fine, and maybe priests are not preaching it enough from the pulpit. I know in our parish, there's a long history of preaching it, and with the previous pastors, and also we have great confessions on weekends, but there's a lot of parishes that don't. So the priests themselves need to constantly instruct, teach, preach on the sacrament of confession, sacrament of baptism, so to speak, and what these sacraments do. So I think because we have a lost generation or two because of the catechism so bad, that we have to be basic in the pulpit, to instruct our faith.
Well, Father John, it seems like a lot of times people act as if we're talking too much about sin these days. Another topic, which is like incredible, but it seems to be we're almost to the original blessing concept, going back to some of the craziness of the 70s and the
Matthew
80s.
Fox.
Right, Matthew Fox and his rave masses. But here's another question that we kind of hear about on the network as well, and that's papal infallibility. Because different statements come out from Rome, and during periods of time, let's say that John Paul II was there or Benedict was there, maybe some of those statements that came out of there, a lot of people who would consider themselves traditionalists or conservative would think, yeah, everybody's got to follow just what they said because they're the Pope. And now today, some of the perspectives may be a little broader, a little different, and you kind of get maybe the people who are a little more liberal, quote unquote, in their Catholicism are now saying the opposite about the existing statements that are coming out of Rome. How is one, as a Catholic, to understand infallibility, Father?
I think as it's clearly defined by the First Vatican Council and then explained again in the Catechism, infallibility applies to those things on faith and morals when the Holy Father teaches explicitly and officially, and besides the unique occurrences like the ex cathedra statements or an ecumenical council that he approves of, there's also the ordinary magisterium, and that's what's been consistently taught through the ages. So when a pope issues his own private opinion or makes a prudential judgment, we're to respect that, but that's not infallible. When he makes a formal thing like Pius XII did with the Assumption, or like Pope St. Paul VI, when he reiterated the ordinary magisterium on Humani Vitae, that's considered infallible teaching. But then the day-to-day things, or when he's reshuffling the curia, when he's making difference, even Pope Benedict had said, you can disagree with popes on certain issues, but you can't disagree on the intrinsic evil of abortion.
And that's why popes usually used to not give interviews, so that they wouldn't be taken out of context. So like, on the airplane or what have you, that would be forbidden. And because the media, first of all, translates it from maybe the Italian into their own language, and a lot of the meaning is lost. And so you have to be it used to be just statements from maybe a Wednesday audience teaching or a homily or a Sunday or what have you. But interviews used to be forbidden.
That's a good point. Do you think it's just different today, Father John, with that, just because the nature of the 24-hour news cycle as well, that you just can't avoid that anymore?
Back before John Paul II, you didn't hear the things the Holy Father said. Even a lot of his addresses, they may have been written and put in the AAS or L'Osservatore Romano, but in the United States, we didn't get, like today, like Father Ken just said, when the Pope's on the plane and says something, it's immediate. I mean, there's not even a time lag. And the problem is that it hasn't been officially translated from the Italian to the English, then to the Latin. And maybe it's not an official context, but because of the 24-hour news cycle we're on, it's immediate. But then by the next day, it's old news. People aren't even looking at it anymore.
Right, exactly. And to put it into context, as you're indicating. One of the other questions, Father John, in the book was finding faith in a broken world. Are you seeing that, from a pastoral sense? I mean, you're working in a seminary, Father Ken is in a parish. Do you find that it's more difficult, people searching for faith, or do you think in some ways because things are so bad, there's more people searching for faith?
Yeah, I find, and I'm sure Father Ken finds the same thing, that there's more reliance on faith because it's the one standard, it's the anchor, that's the beautiful symbol of hope, is the anchor that, the faith does not change, the deposit of faith. Now, how it's expressed, how it's, explained, it adapts, but the content remains the same. And people want that. They want it to be a compass, and they want it to be an anchor, so it gives them that stability.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting coming out of the coronavirus up in the Northeast. The governors have been relentless in limiting the number to attend Mass, and of course the obligation has been lifted because of that. But to see the people who are coming to Mass out of devotion and love for the Eucharist and the sacrament of confessions on Saturday, like I said, sometimes both of us have to hear confessions. So people, and we have adoration from 9 to 11 p.m. People are still going to adoration. So there is a definite need that can't be satisfied by the things of the world. And even as though these secular governors try to suppress us, still thriving.
Well, do you think, based on what Father Ken just said and your own experience, Father John, that many times, I hate to say it, but persecution is good for the church?
Well, I mean, look at how the faith in Poland really thrived while the Nazis persecuted them, and then the Russian communists. I think, even though it's not comfortable, the fact that we have to fight in a sense to keep our churches open, to be able to celebrate Mass. Father Ken was just describing how in New Jersey they're limited. I think there's still places like California where they're not allowed to have Mass at all in some places.
The Supreme Court just changed that, though. Yeah,
right.
For California.
Okay. But I do think the opposition and persecution does help because that's how the first 300 years of the church, was the Roman persecution. Not that we look for it, but the fact that I think it was Father Benedict Rochelle who said, if you don't have enemies, then you're not doing your work.
Right, and I think the Lord kind of said that, right? If you're not, in a sense, being persecuted in my name, then maybe you're not doing what you should be doing effectively. One of the other things, we're dealing with a lot of cultural issues where the church runs into difficulties, even with a lot of young people who, let's say, are basically Orthodox, but have gone through school over a number of years, and things like toleration of people's personal feelings about their gender, or et cetera, we're dealing with. So we've got, you talk about in the book, marriage between a man and a woman in that sense, and that seeming exclusive to some people. And at the same time, you also deal with the question, which a lot of people say is, what happens if I'm invited to a same-sex wedding? Is that something I'm really allowed to go to?
Yeah, I think, yeah, go ahead, Ken.
No, go ahead.
I think what we try to tell people is that, this isn't just the church made up these things. We're trying to be faithful to the deposit of faith given to us by Christ. And we have to do it in a charitable way. We also have to do it in a truthful way, so that it's not that we're being mean or nasty to people who are getting married outside of church, or, invalid, whether it's two men getting married together or someone who's invalidly married or who was married before and didn't get an annulment and then is getting married a second time. An invalid marriage is invalid, whether it's two guys, two ladies, or two people who were previously married without the annulment. And we want consistency too, that any and all sex outside of marriage is considered sinful. Right. That applies, to homosexual activity, but also heterosexual. But when you say that, people say, like you were mentioning, diversity. Well, there was the heresy of Americanism that we had many years ago in the past, where go along, get along, blend in with the crowd. Well, the church is not with it. That's not our modus operandi.
And and I know in your catechetical programs, it's very important. Like for our 8th graders, they're going to have a theology of the body sessions, and so that also a lot of it has to do with instruction too, because in your secular high schools and everything, they're teaching this, like in New Jersey, the same-sex attraction agenda is already in the school system from grade up. So we, in our catechetical program, have to address that, and we found that the theology of the body for the 8th graders is very important.
Right, and I would think, Father John, you're also, based on what Father Ken's saying, you're also dealing with a lot of peer pressure in society, in the culture, and when you go to school, etc., for the idea of our job as Christians is to be kind and loving, which it is, and a lot of that gets pushed into a concept of toleration.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
but we're also doing countercultural, too.
Yes. I remember, I think it was a year or two ago, I was at Father Ken's parish, and one of his altar servers told me he got yelled at by the principal because some girl in his class said she's a cat. So don't call her Susie, call her Meow Meow or whatever it was. And he said, that's stupid. You're not a cat. You're a human being. He got sent to the principal's office.
Right. Yes.
This is the craziness that we're dealing with in the educational system of the secular schools.
Right, and I guess my question to both of you would be, I think, unfortunately, most people know it's ridiculous, but they're afraid, basically, of being canceled or losing their job or being ostracized, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's right, that people are afraid they're going to lose their job or not get a promotion, or even at a more subtle level, that people won't like them.
Right.
And, people, they don't like being unliked. So I think that is a motivational factor.
Right, almost like a shunning going on. The other thing that you mentioned in the book near the end is something that I wonder if it's as obvious, but I think it's actually more so there today than it used to be. The New Age movement. Do you still see that showing up?
Yeah, I don't see as much here at the seminary, thank God. But I know at the parish, I saw it, when I would help out at Father Ken's place, people ask you questions and they're very honest and sincere, but you can see that they're buying into a lot of the New Age phenomena, that people were from a different dimension, or, it's the Dianetic stuff that you see among the movie stars. It's filtering into some of our people.
But a lot of the New Age is really old age.
Yeah.
It's like old heresies rehashed and give some bling to it. But I haven't noticed too much here overtly. But it does creep in in some of their mannerisms. Like when you go bless a home, you don't see a crucifix, you don't see a statue or anything. You see a mirror, you see this secular paintings. So it creeps in the fact that our faith and sacramentals. Now we can't even use holy water in church during this pandemic, so I keep a tank of it and encourage people to take bottles of holy water home, because we thrive on sacramentals to bring us to relate to the sacrament.
Right.
And if you don't fill that void, the New Age with their crystals and all these things, or the Eastern mysticism with their incense sticks, these are the things that some people fill their so to speak void to their life. So you're constantly have to instruct them about what is appropriate and what's proper to lead you to work in your private devotional life, to lead you to worship.
Well, that's why Mother started a catalog for those holy reminders, but it's also, as you're pointing out, and this is the thing, it's so part of the secular culture now, people don't even realize that they're really dealing with things that are kind of New Age. One last question just before we go. The impact of the scandal on the faithful, Father John.
Yeah, unfortunately, it hit us hard. I mean, there's a few people who just either don't go to church anymore, or their faith has been shaken. But like here at the seminary, we thought there'd be a huge dip. The opposite took place. More guys entered the seminary. We're at full capacity now here at Mount St. Mary's because guys who saw the scandal were appalled by it and disgusted by it, and we're not happy with the response by some of our church leaders. They said, you know what, I want to go in and help as best I can. I want to be a good priest, God willing, to make up for those bad ones.
Doug, Father John is very humble. The full capacity, because he's assigned there. So he's like a draw, I think.
There you go. Hopefully,
But in the parish part with the scandal, we were founded, the Diocese of Metuchen, by ex-Cardinal Keck. So it kind of hit home here very strongly.
Oh,
I
that's
would
right.
say it hit home, especially with the people attached to the extraordinary form of the Mass. They really don't trust our bishops and all that of what we've gone through. The majority of the people who are your everyday Sunday that are attending Mass here understand that, you know, the church is human and divine, and its human element, like you and me, members, we sin and we need to go to confession. Yeah, so there is a little tension. I think we also see that various income has been down because of that too.
Right.
But some people use that as an excuse too,
Right.
you know, to check out. So you have to also realize that looking for any excuse to use it. Not to underestimate the scandal and to be scandalized by this, but.
Well, if you're a curious Catholic, this is the book for you. Web of Faith, Answers to Theological Questions, and of course the big draw, Father John Trigilio, as Father Ken said. Of course, his personality alone will drive sales through Religious Catalog, and of course you can watch them on their show. And Father John Trigilio as well is doing Open Line on Mondays for us, so check him out on radio. Thank you both. It's always great to see both of you. And this has been an EWTN Bookmark, the book Web of Faith, Curious Catholics' Answers to Theological Questions, proudly published by EWTN Publishing, available through our EWTN Religious Catalog. All things Catholic. Check it out. Check us out next time right here on Bookmark. Thanks.